Offshore oil platforms are designed to withstand the most severe weather conditions. In the middle of the ocean, hundreds of miles from land, workers rely on the structural integrity of these massive machines. Every bolt, every weld, and every beam is supposed to guarantee their safety. But on March 27, 1980, the crew of the Alexander L. Kielland platform would discover that even the largest and most trusted structures are not invincible. The Alexander L. Kielland was a semi-submersible accommodation platform, essentially a floating hotel for oil workers. Its primary function was to house workers from the Edda platform, which was operated by Phillips Petroleum in the Ekofisk oil field. Owned by Stavanger Drilling, the Kielland had originally been built as a drilling rig, but was later converted to serve as living quarters. Onboard facilities included sleeping quarters, a mess hall, recreational rooms, and offices. On the night of the disaster, 212 men were on board. For many, it was just another shift in the harsh, unpredictable environment of the North Sea. Life on offshore platforms is a mix of long hours, harsh weather, and brief moments of camaraderie. Crews often worked for weeks at a time before heading home. On the Kielland, as with most rigs, there was a routine: wake up, work, eat, rest, repeat. But the North Sea, known for its treacherous conditions, was always a looming threat. Waves frequently reached heights of over 30 feet, and gale-force winds were common. Yet, for the men aboard, it was all part of the job. March 27, 1980, began like any other day. The weather was rough, but not unusual for the region. Waves climbed to 40 feet, winds howled at 40 knots, but the rig's operations continued as normal. That evening, many of the crew gathered in the recreation room to watch a movie. Others were reading, writing letters home, or playing cards. Laughter echoed through the halls. Outside, nature was stirring, but inside there was a sense of calm. Then, at approximately 1830 local time, that calm was shattered. A sharp metallic crack echoed through the rig. Crew members described it as sounding like a massive steel cable snapping. Moments later, the floor beneath them began to shift. Drinks spilled, chairs slid, and conversations stopped. Confusion turned to panic as the platform started to tilt. Alarms blared throughout the rig, and a voice crackled over the PA system. All personnel, report to your muster stations immediately. The cause of the tilt was a catastrophic structural failure. One of the rig's main bracing supports, a vital component that kept the massive structure stable, had fractured. Investigations would later reveal that the bracing had been compromised by a combination of poor maintenance, previous damage that had gone unaddressed, and corrosion. A crack in the weld, barely noticeable to the naked eye, had gone unchecked. That tiny defect set off a chain of events that would become Norway's deadliest offshore disaster. As the platform continued to list, crew members rushed to their designated lifeboat stations. Panic set in as the tilt became more pronounced. People struggled to stand, slipping on floors that now resembled steep hills. Equipment and furniture became deadly projectiles. I remember running, one survivor recalled. But it felt like I was climbing a mountain. Everything was sliding. People were screaming. Launching the lifeboats proved nearly impossible. The angle of the platform meant that lifeboats on the high side dangled uselessly above the water, while those on the low side were either submerged or crushed against the hull. In the chaos, some crew members tried to release the lifeboats manually, but the mechanisms jammed. One lifeboat was successfully lowered, but as it touched the rough sea, a wave slammed it against the rig, destroying it instantly and throwing its occupants into the freezing water. For many, there was no choice but to jump. The North Sea's waters were just above freezing. Survival time without protective gear was mere minutes. Hypothermia set in almost immediately. The cold hits you like a wall, another survivor said. You gasp and the water fills your mouth. You try to swim, but your body just stops. Within 20 minutes of the initial fracture, the Alexander L. Kielland capsized completely. Men still inside were trapped as water flooded the corridors. Those who managed to escape faced a different kind of nightmare. Battling towering waves, darkness, and the biting cold. Desperate crew members clung to debris, their fingers numb and their bodies weakening with every passing second. Rescue operations were launched swiftly. Support vessels in the area, along with helicopters from the Norwegian Air Force, raced to the scene. But the weather, which had already been brutal, was now relentless. High winds buffeted rescue helicopters, making flying hazardous. Waves reaching 50 feet crashed over the decks of rescue ships, making it treacherous to pull survivors from the water. Visibility was minimal. Crews scoured the ocean, flashlights piercing the darkness, searching for any sign of life. As dawn broke, the grim reality became clear. Out of the 212 men aboard, 123 were dead. Many bodies were never recovered, claimed by the unforgiving depths of the North Sea. Survivors were pulled from the water, some clinging to life, others slipping away, just as rescuers reached them. The tragedy sent shockwaves through Norway and the global offshore community.
We were shocked by this accident, but we have a feeling that the operations are safe.
The loss was personal. Every community seemed to know someone who had been on that rig. Public outcry was immediate. How could this happen? How could one of the most advanced rigs in the world collapse so suddenly? An official investigation revealed a series of failures. The fractured bracing had been previously damaged, but maintenance reports were ignored or delayed. There was a culture of complacency. Minor issues were brushed aside, and safety checks were often rushed or overlooked. Evacuation procedures were found to be inadequate, and the lifeboat systems were outdated. In short, it was a disaster waiting to happen. The inquiry's findings led to sweeping changes in offshore safety regulations. Evacuation drills became mandatory. Lifeboat release mechanisms were redesigned. Structural inspections became more rigorous. The offshore industry, notorious for its get-the-job-done mentality, was forced to confront its failings. Lives lost on the Kielland demanded it. A memorial now stands in Stavanger, Norway, a solemn reminder of the 123 men who never came home. Their names etched in stone. Families gather there every year, laying flowers, sharing stories, remembering. It's not just a tragedy, one relative said. It's a lesson written in blood. We can't let it happen again. Today, as oil rigs continue to dot the North Sea, the story of the Alexander L. Kielland is taught to every worker who steps aboard. Safety briefings reference that night. Drills are practiced with it in mind. The ocean remains vast, powerful, and unforgiving. And on that fateful evening in 1980, it reminded everyone of just how fragile even the mightiest structures can be. The Alexander L. Kielland disaster was more than an accident. It was a tragedy born of oversight, complacency, and missed warnings. The cost was 123 lives, a nation's grief, and a wake-up call that still echoes through the industry today.